Need to be taller.
Well, thank you, Chief Scott, and thank you, everyone, for being here today. We greatly appreciate the opportunity to address you, tell you a little bit about what we're seeing and what we're doing about it. Before I begin, though, I just want to acknowledge the devastating wildfires currently ongoing here in Southern and Northern California. As you know, at the Department of Homeland Security, we also have the Federal Emergency Management Agency. We've seen a very unfortunate, significant loss of life, incredible destruction with more than 10,000 homes destroyed to date. But progress continues to be made thanks to the incredible heroism of the firefighters, and the state of California is projecting that both fires will be contained by the end of the month. I do want to assure everybody, however, that DHS is here for the long haul. We are opening new disaster recovery centers, conducting assessments so that communities can begin the process of rebuilding. So in addition to Chief Scott, I also want to acknowledge our Director of Field Operations behind us, our Director of Air and Marine, and to thank you all three for your outstanding efforts here in San Diego and elsewhere in the sector. As I always do, to the dedicated men and women of CBP ICE, USCIS, and the U.S. Coast Guard, thank you. Thank your families for your ongoing commitment to keeping our borders and nation safe and secure. Your country thanks you. We appreciate your efforts each and every day. I also want to thank our partners at the Department of Defense, who, as the Chief said, have once again stepped up to the plate to assist DHS in hardening our ports of entry and supporting our personnel. Let me first acknowledge what was referenced and what I'm standing in front of. This is a border wall with row upon row of concertina wire. Make no mistake, we are very serious. You will not get into our country illegally. Thanks to the quick work by CBP and DoD in installing wire like this, we now have miles of concertina wire at our ports of entry and elsewhere along our southern border. As we continue to see the arrival of additional caravan members south of our border, I want to take this opportunity to set the record straight on what is currently happening at the border and who we see and what we're doing about it. First, some critics and media have stated that DHS is overreacting to the presence of a few hundred migrants that are thousands of miles or weeks away from the United States. I'm here to tell you today that the reality is that there are currently over 6,200 individuals camped out south of the U.S. border in Tijuana today as I stand here. In Mexicali, there are more than 3,000 caravan members. These two groups, combined with other caravans making their way through the Northern Triangle in Mexico, will result in approximately 8,000 to 10,000 migrants amassing along our southern border. The crisis is real, and it is just on the other side of this wall. Second, some continue to report that the caravan is made up of mostly women and children who are fleeing violence in the Northern Triangle. The reality is that the majority of the caravan that we see is made up of single adult males or teenage males. In addition, we have identified over 500 criminals, to include known gang members, contained in the flow of the caravan. To fuel the sympathetic narrative we continue to see repeated in U.S. media, we know that organizers of the caravan have been pushing women and children and others to the front of the caravan in hope that law enforcement will not engage them. This is particularly dangerous given the unusual propensity for violence we have seen in this caravan, the assaults on border police in multiple countries, and the use of incendiary devices. This is not an organic flow of migrants. Third, critics continue to say that all members of the caravan are fleeing violence and thus deserve asylum. The reality is that based on historic trends, intel, and open source reporting, we believe that most of the caravan members will make frivolous or unsubstantiated claims of asylum. Low standards for claiming a fear of persecution have allowed aliens with meritless claims to illegally enter our country, claim credible fear, and then in many cases be released pending lengthy proceedings, generally to disappear. In the last year, only 9%, 1 in 10, of those from the Northern Triangle who applied for asylum were determined eligible by a federal judge. More than 9 in 10 were found not to be eligible or chose not to complete the process. What is clear is that many of those who are here or en route to our southern border via these caravans are economic migrants or are seeking to be reunited with their families already in the United States. Wanting a job is not a basis for asylum under U.S. law. Wanting to be reunited with your family is not a basis for asylum under U.S. law. Wanting to live in the United States, not a basis of asylum under U.S. law. While there are legal ways for individuals to seek all of these outcomes, falsely claiming asylum means that those with legitimate asylum claims are buried in the backlog. Let me be clear, the Caravan does not give one a special right to enter this country. Members of the Caravan will wait in the back of the line of those already waiting to be processed at our ports of entry. As we are witnessing, caravans are dangerous for migrants. They are preyed upon by criminals, traffickers, and cartels. Our nation is experiencing an unprecedented crisis on our southern border that is the result of specific legal loopholes. I know you've heard me talk about these before, but they are created by poorly drafted federal law and a deeply flawed Ninth Circuit court ruling. It prevents the detention and repatriation of illegal alien minors and family units. The smugglers know these loopholes exist, and they're taking advantage of us and the migrants who do not know any better. Our weak immigration laws have encouraged caravans to try to break our nation's laws. And once again, I call on Congress to do their job and close these loopholes. I refuse to believe that it is too difficult for Congress to do their job in the interest of national security. This administration will not tolerate frivolous asylum claims or illegal entry. If you try to enter our country without authorization, you have broken the law of the United States. You will be detained, prosecuted, and repatriated. In advance of the Caravan's arrival, we have hardened ports of entry, deployed the military, and surged resources. We have worked closely with state and local law enforcement to be able to rapidly deploy where needed. President Trump has also taken decisive action, making illegal entrants ineligible for asylum. Under the president's proclamation, if you enter the U.S. illegally, you will not be allowed to claim asylum. Our generous asylum system is currently being abused, and frivolous claims take away resources for those who are genuinely fleeing persecution. I also want to say that today I am deeply disappointed and troubled by the Ninth Circuit ruling yesterday. We have seen time and time again these open border advocacy groups venue shop here in the Ninth Circuit and obtain temporary injunctions that are far outside the judicial mainstream, and in this case will unequivocally make the United States less secure and likely will result in more migrants being harmed by smugglers and gangs attempting to enter the United States illegally. Let me be clear, this court from a chamber in San Francisco has replaced the president's judgment with regard to the fully delegated authority to determine what is a true national security threat to our nation's sovereignty. This is a dangerous ruling, and given last year's Supreme Court ruling on this issue, will undoubtedly be overturned. I would be remiss if I didn't quickly mention the border wall, which remains a top priority for the department and for this administration. We have championed the border wall system, built the first border wall in a decade, and replaced old fencing with new segments starting last week. And we are asking Congress for billions more so that we have the infrastructure, technology, and personnel needed to gain operational control of our border. To close, I'd just like to reiterate the DHS and the administration will continue to take all possible actions to stop the Caravan from entering the United States illegally without just cause and to ensure our borders are secure. And with that, I'm happy to, with my colleagues here, answer any questions you might have.
Right here, gentleman right here. Secretary, with all due respect, this looks a lot like a photo op. The barbed wire is only behind you. It doesn't extend to the sea. It doesn't extend up to the hill. Why did it stop right there?
Well, first of all, in the sea, what you see is the United States Coast Guard. I have full faith and confidence that they'll be able to stop anybody that goes that way.
Before you came, we saw somebody come through the sea and claim asylum here in front of cameras and in front of the...
And they were stopped and they made an illegal entry, so they will be treated as such. In terms of up the wall, what I would say is this is where we saw the biggest potential place where we did see migrants climbing the wall. Wherever we see them, we will put wire up and we will make sure they cannot enter the country illegally.
Right here in the red.
What about the judge's ruling yesterday? Are you guys not going to follow that ruling?
We will follow all laws and judicial ruling, but we will also be appealing it as quickly as possible. I have no doubt that we will be successful.
Right here in the blue, ma'am.
I have a question on the military timetable clarification. I know they're reporting to you. Can you clarify the timetable for the military or what the conditions are surrounding their help with the enforcement?
Sure. I spoke to Secretary Mattis just this morning. I have no doubt that DoD will continue to be our partners in this mission until it is resolved.
Right here.
How will the ruling impact what's being done here on the board?
Well, what we're doing is we are looking very carefully at what the judge has ruled, and we will comply with it.
I'm sorry, how will the ruling impact the situation that we saw earlier now that they're saying that they can decide that they are possible?
Any asylum claims will be treated with respect to the law, but again, what we will be doing is making sure that this is a safe and orderly process. No one gets to skip the line by breaking the law.
All right, gentlemen, right here in the blue.
What does it being resolved look like in your mind?
A safe and orderly process where we can work with our partners throughout the region. I've spent a lot of time working with the Northern Triangle countries and the government of Mexico to ensure that vulnerable populations are helped as soon as possible in the process so that they do not need to take a dangerous journey and that we do not have a system that encourages smugglers and traffickers to not only cause violence and crime but to prey on vulnerable populations.
So right here.
Madam Secretary, we've talked about this and there's been questions asked. Do you feel as though the president is breaking the law by taking away that section which says individuals can't cross illegally? That is not only just a United States law, that's an international law.
The president's authority to determine who comes into our country and under what circumstances has been upheld by the United States Supreme Court.
Right, but he does not make law. The president cannot make law.
His authority in this instance has been upheld by the United States Supreme Court.
Ma'am, right here, down. Last question.
Yeah, so there's some missions that parts of the military have completed. So what you're seeing is a movement of forces. But as I said earlier, I have spoken with Secretary Mattis directly, and I have no doubt they will continue to partner with us in this mission until it is resolved.
All right, one more right here in the purple, and then we're going to call it a day.
How about the local economy, the region that is suffering like crazy in the last couple of weeks because of this situation, the length of the crossing of the people that usually cross for years?
One of our missions at the Department of Homeland Security that's also carried out by the gentleman behind me is to facilitate legal trade and travel. We take that mission very seriously. We are working with all parties on both sides of the border to ensure that in the midst of this migrant crisis, we can continue to ensure that legal trade and travel continues. And I'm sorry, you had one? So they're criminals, and some of them are gang members, and those are the ones that we know about. So we will continue to work with our partners to make sure we understand who's in the flow. What you have to remember is that a good portion of this caravan busted through in a violent way the border between Guatemala and Mexico. We don't know who they are, so we are working to find out who they are. What we do know, though, is at least 500 of them are criminals and gang members.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's be here.
All right, thank you.
Sorry that you guys didn't get to...
Oh, I'm not sorry at all.